Pioneer Valley and how
Yeah.
Flywheel plays into the Pioneer Valley.
Pioneer Valley is a huge thing. I mean, I don't even know how to define it. I guess theoretically it's defined between Springfield and Greenfield, and it's a lot of people. It's a lot of different communities and different demographics of, there's students, there's working class people, there's people who are really impoverished, there's people who are really rich, and this is all within the valley. A lot of people look at it as this liberal area that's got a lot of creativity, and that exists to an extent, but I think there's also other sides of that not everybody really gets to experience if they're mostly in Northampton and Amherst. And I grew up in Holyoke and Chicopee, and that was kind of a different experience than when I moved to South Hadley. And like being by Mount Holyoke College and other stuff, that opened up my eyes to another part of the valley. And it was kind of a different experience. I would have experienced a totally different upbringing if I had just lived in Holyoke and Chicopee throughout my youth.
So in a lot of ways, the Flywheel is a space that transcends some of these.
Yes, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I think it's something that it's tied into all the valley, and elements of the valley definitely know about it. I think there's people though that could utilize Flywheel, and Flywheel could benefit from working within people more towards the lower valley. Although there are also a lot of people in the hill towns we could benefit from working with as well. So it's kind of something where people from Holyoke, Easthampton, Northampton, Amherst, Hadley, even towns like Palmer come here kind of regularly. But then there's people from like Chicopee you hardly ever see here, or Springfield, and from Greenfield or Turner's Falls, or further up by Huntington. And those people aren't as regularly involved with events going on at Flywheel. Sometimes they may be here for kids events, which is cool. That's been kind of getting some new people into the space and stuff. But I think there's always a need for more awareness with what's going on with Flywheel.
So I want to know if you could talk a little bit about the move from old Flywheel, maybe talk a little bit about that space into this new building, and maybe talk a little bit about this space.
The old building down the road on 2 Holyoke Street was an old doctor's office. And it was a building that we kind of conveniently had different rooms. So there was a room for a cafe in the front, a room in the middle for performance, a room behind that for a gallery, and then a room in the back for storage and a small office. So it was kind of a nice setup. There was some limitations with space for performance things, and that was difficult because there's a certain point where we had events and we just guessed, oh, we could let 100 people in here, it'll fit. Nobody really gets too crammed. And then after a certain point, there was an event that happened in Rhode Island with that fire with Great White, and we had to have an alarm system put in and some other things to fireproof this space. And our capacity got changed to 80 people with volunteers and performers. And we became kind of limited with what we could do at certain events. There were people who had performed at Flywheel in the late 90s who couldn't come back in 2005 because there just wasn't enough room for their audience. So we were looking for other options, for alternatives for spaces, and we found out that the old Easthampton Town Hall was going to be getting renovated and turned into an arts performance building, something that was kind of in the center of Easthampton and dedicated to community arts. And we felt like Flywheel was a good part of that place. It could become part of the identity of that. And the Eastmont Custom Frame Shop and the gallery here, and then Easthampton City Arts and Easthampton Cultural Council moved into here. I think it was probably like 2008, and Flywheel closed our doors. I think it was 2007. It might have been 2008. I get kind of confused. It's a period where we thought we were going to be transferring from our old space to this space in the old Easthampton Town Hall, maybe a 1.5 year period, and it took about 2.5, almost close to 3 years to be ready to be open. And I think it was into 2007 when we left the old space. And it was a lot of work going into this building. There was a lot of room that had to be worked on. The performance space that looks wide and open now was actually like 4 or 5 different office spaces. So walls had to be demoed. There's a bunch of technical stuff that we did. And we had to do things just structural things, like the ceilings and the walls were made out of tin. That acoustically would have been a nightmare if we had 10 walls. So we had to work with the town to get an okay to be able to put drywall up, which they weren't totally for because this is an historic building. So we had to do certain things within certain types of codes, but we were able to get the okay to be able to do that. And that helped out with soundproofing the space and getting the room to sound like a room that could be used for performance. But yeah, it was a really intense couple years. We put about $40,000 worth of work into the building, which as an organization, the most we'd ever done fundraising was maybe like $4,000 or $5,000 over a year period. So that over a couple year period was kind of astonishing for us. But from some large grants and other things, some large donations, we were able to pull it off.
So I think part of the Flywheel story that I think is the most important is this idea that I think a lot of DIY culture in America has this experience of being very marginalized, or this experience of being very much like reactionary and alternative to.
Yeah.
And what this transformative process of entering this space is really taking that ethos and turning it into like a local community, like a genuinely like local community.
Yeah.
Like more so than, oh, we all congregate in that open space because it's open. This is rather like we're, you know, with Flywheel now, we're right in the center of Easthampton. And I just want to know if you could talk maybe a little bit about, as an organizer and a booker and a performer here, how like who in the city structure you've spoken to and like who you communicate with in Easthampton.
Well, I mean, we talk to people on a daily basis if we're here in and out of the space doing things. It's a difficult thing because of our sense of our identity. There's so much history in this building. When we first had an event inviting people from the town to come here and see about our plans for the building and some ideas, people told us how they were married upstairs in the building. There's all this huge history in this building, and it was kind of difficult to figure out exactly how Flywheel was going to become a part of that. If people in Easthampton were going to feel alienated and not any way affiliated with Flywheel. But as we've been able to do more things, we've been able to get a sense that I think a lot of local people really appreciate what we're doing. They might not understand what we're doing at first. Our space down the road, I think people always alluded that we were a hangout for teenagers, and it was like loud music and maybe people who were interested in smoking weed or something like that. And we really wanted to downplay the fact that it was anything like that. We're a collective made up of a lot of different people, but sometimes due to the fact that there's some alternative music that might be loud or things kind of punk rock, that it seems reactionary or somewhat aggressive. And we're really trying to feel ways to make things accessible to people and inviting, as opposed to kind of a thing that might be off-putting. Because when you're in a space like this, it's something where everything's under a microscope. When you're doing things that are kind of, we want to give local bands an outlet to perform and do certain stuff, and this is something we're never going to censor things. But at the same time, I think we have to make sure that we're aware of what we're doing in the space, because there's certain consequences with neighbors who live directly next door to us. If we're super loud at 11:30 at night, we're going to have the police come, and we've had several police complaints. We actually had the police come last Saturday. So that's another thing. Like, that's somebody who we dealt with a handful of times since reopening here last April. Is Easthampton Police and us have had some discussions about what we can do with soundproofing and working with the neighbors, and we've gotten on pretty good terms with the police. What we've done, and we're going to be doing again in May, is having a community open house where we invite local businesses and residences and people from Easthampton to come by and hang out and see what's going on with the space, just kind of have like a film going and stuff, and kind of give people a small tour of the space. And when we initially did that this past summer, some local neighbors who lived right next door, who we had never met before, came over and introduced themselves, and we were able to get off on pretty good terms. So that's been a really good step in trying to get to know people better and having people feel comfortable coming here. Other things like the flea market that we do every month, we tend to get people who normally wouldn't come to our events, who are local people, who may be going down the street to the Silver Spoon Diner in the morning. They want to come by and check out some stuff for sale. And then when Art Walk happens, once every the second Saturday of the month, which is this Saturday, all types of people come through that. There's people who walk down this street and Cottage Street who are checking out different galleries. And with Flywheel being open and doing new installations every month, we get some new people, some new faces. I guess that's kind of been the experience. I mean, there's probably other things that are in different contexts, but I can't really say that's my personal things. Like I've dealt with a lot of different people here in town by, just kind of walking down the street and people recognize me from Flywheel or doing certain things.
Could you give us an example of the scope of the Flywheel programming, like ranging from, like children or town activities?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pretty broad range of stuff we've done here with jazz music, with folk music, and electronic music that's kind of stuff that might be made with a computer or with instruments. There's a lot of rock music that does happen. There's music that's orientated for kids. That's a lot of times they want to be in rock bands, which is then a little bit disappointing to me because I feel like music for kids can be whatever it is. It doesn't have to be loud. Like, kids like to rock, but I think the bands that play here for kids are rocking out for more themselves than kids. So it's kind of like this deafening thing where little kids are wearing earplugs, and I don't know if I see that as being something that's totally awesome. But that's my impersonation of it. There's a lot of other experimental music with things like punk bands and death metal bands and other things like that. And then there are other people who are doing stuff with banjo. So, I mean, I guess that's a folk-based thing, but it's also kind of a country thing that I'd like to have somebody like do square dancing in the back here. Although with the poles in the back of the room, I don't know how square dancing will work, but I guess we'll see it once we try it. But there's been other use of the room for performance stuff, like a couple theatrical things, some film screenings, and nobody's done live hip-hop here yet, but that's something I'd like to do soon. The thing I worry about certain sound is that the low end is an issue with our neighbors, and some music that is reliant on dance kind of bass or that type of stuff could be a lot more apparent to our neighbors than a band that's the same decibel level or even louder than the sound going through the PA. So we have to be a little bit aware of what we're doing exactly with the actual like decibel level and tones of music.
And in terms of like long-term Flywheel plans, like right now, is there like a 5-year plan? Is there some?
We have some things that we kind of wrote down a year ago that were plans, that were goals. It was things like having this cafe ready after a certain point, having this different things in the space that we needed to do. I think one of our immediate goals for the summer is to try to get some sort of coolant system for this space, but the amount of money that looks like it's needed to be able to cool a room in that capacity is a lot. So we're still trying to figure out realistically what the best option would be for some sort of AC unit that can be put into the back of the building and then circulated throughout this space. And if we got a big enough unit, we could actually cool the entire first floor here, but that's something that's pretty costly. That would be a huge project that I think like we'd have to get state money for. It wouldn't be something we could realistically do ourselves. But we really would like to get some sort of cooling system for middle of July, August, because there's going to be shows that if there's more than 80 people in the middle of August here, it's going to be over 90 degrees in the room. And that's kind of a liability thing where, you know, somebody could pass out. There's so many different factors involved. Even performers, it's a health issue. So it's something where even though we have a fan plugged in and we got ice water out here, it's not going to help the people inside this performance space. So that's one immediate goal that I'm trying to work on to try to figure out how we can have a kind of a cool summer.
And so just the last couple questions.
Yeah.
What do you think Flywheel, so we talked a little bit about Flywheel offers the community and
yeah.
what's offered this DIY community. What do you think it offers performers who come to this space?
Performers, monetarily, it might not pay as much as some bars might. I can't tell. It's difficult because there are people who play here and they get paid X amount of dollars. We deal with their booking agent and they get paid what they get paid at a bar. And then there's people who are local musicians who get paid, who never get paid most of the time. They play Flywheel and they get $50, and that's like kind of big. You know, it's like that's more than gas money if they live a town or two away. And it's not a lot of money compared to like what you might do if you do a party in your friend's basement. But sometimes if you do a party in your friend's basement and 50 people show up, half of them are spending money on like beer or cigarettes, and they're not going to give the band more than $1 or2. So you still have that same $50. So it's kind of a funny dichotomy where I think generally the 65% of the door that can go to performers, we usually take 35% of the door from all events. It's a decent amount of money to pay 1 or 2 performers. Usually if you have 3 or 4 performers, everybody might not be getting paid, but there's a way to try to make your shows so that you can help out the local performers who may not get paid one time and get them on the next time where they can get some gas money or something. And the other alternative, though, is if local performers know they're not going to be getting paid gas money, is to bring and make their own merchandise like you do with tapes and T-shirts and stuff. And if you sell a handful of things, that's some money to help cover some costs. I think overall, though, the performers, they get a great sounding room, that has a decent PA, somebody who's doing sound, who's paying attention. There's places that might have better PAs, but the sound guy's playing a video game or has no interest in anything going on with the performance, and that totally hurts the thing. Whereas Flywheel, usually there's like a undivided attention, and there might be some times where maybe somebody isn't 100% interested in what's going on, but you at least get the feeling that you're doing this for, it's like a sense of purpose, that you're doing something that, like, you know, people feel like really they benefit from performing here. Whereas I know a lot of people who play a really great set in a bar and they don't know what's going on. They don't know if it's going to be, if it was well received or what it was. It's kind of a confusing thing where a couple of people will clap, but a bunch of people are sitting in the back drinking, and it's kind of dark, and you don't know what's going on, if they're having a good time or what. So it's kind of it's a little different than some performance spaces, and I hope that because of spaces like this, working as an example, other places can start to evolve, or more people can organize to try to get a DIY space in their community, to be able to get spaces that's all ages and do eclectic music and stuff. Because I know of a handful of other spaces in the Northeast, but really it's like I can count them off the tip of my hand. It's like 5 spaces probably between here, New York, Maine, Vermont, New Jersey, Philly, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and that's not like that. 5 spaces to 10 spaces for that many states is kind of it's absurd to me. There should be at least 10 more.
So our final question for some fun stuff. Do you have any like Flywheel memories that like come to you as like, you know, definitive moments in Flywheel's history?
There's been some really interesting moments. I mean, when Flywheel first started doing events, Thurston Moore had played around here a handful of times, but you know, he kind of did stuff on the down low, and you had to kind of be in the know to know about it. It wasn't like something that was exclusive for everybody, really. And there's one performance that he did here that the word kind of got out, but there still wasn't very many people. There was probably 10 people, but it was him, Jay Mascis, Don Fleming. I think it was maybe it wasn't Lee Ronaldo. It may have been what's his name, Jim O'Rourke. And then, what's his name from television, the guitar player, and they performed as Foot on a car in front of Flywheel through the PA with a wireless mic, and were like bouncing a ball on the car of the hood, and they were just like noodling on a guitar and stuff. And it was really funny seeing a performance like that, kind of in early parts of Flywheel kind of history, because it was something that today, I don't even know how you could do that, because immediately you would get out on Twitter or something and there'd be like 200 people trying to go to it. But back then it's something where you could do something small and random with your friends, and it would just be people, whoever there was walking by saw it. It wasn't for anybody specifically, it was just a couple friends goofing around in the car. There were some other performance things that happened at Flywheel that were really unique. There are so many different things that happened, like William Parker, I think, played at Flywheel around 2000. A couple other things like that that were really awesome nights of music that they happen around the valley every once in a while, but they're not always consistent. It's like a really special night of something, and then you might be able to experience it a year later if you're lucky. And there's been some great things since we reopened here. When Arab on Radar came last summer, that was a really nice performance. I mean, it was their first reunion show after disbanding for about 8 years. So a lot people traveled from like 6 different states to come to it, and we had a great crowd. Elephant Six label people played here a couple weeks ago, and we had enough people buy tickets online to sell out the space. Yet about 60 people didn't show up who bought tickets. So we had about 180, 190 people in there, and there's still room for another 40, 50 people who bought tickets through PayPal and couldn't make it here. And it kind of showed me that doing certain things electronically can be a weird kind of thing where not everybody, people who live right down the road couldn't go to this performance, but people from 3 states away bought the tickets because they were cheap online and then didn't come. So it's something where we have to reevaluate accessibility issues with doing stuff with PayPal tickets and stuff like that.
All right, Olivia, any final thoughts?
I mean, all of mine would be really, really basic.
Whatever. Yeah.
I'm trying to think, just for us to have footage.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
If you wanted to expand on what exactly DIY culture is.
Yeah, I mean, DIY culture is something that has evolved since rock and roll and other things. I mean, there was people before rock and roll, Sun Ra did really nice records, self-release stuff. I mean, people did acetates years ago and small things, and a lot of this is looked at more as outsider art as opposed to maybe some sort of a organized community. But as things evolved, where people decide to make music and art and take it into their own hands, as opposed to going through a distribution kind of process, because I guess things evolved more so past the 50s and 60s. There was small press type stuff that happened and other art stuff and kind of private press records, but the punk movement kind of reignited it in the late 70s with people doing small runs of records and cassettes, and eventually there's a certain point in the 90s when CDRs got really cheap in the late 90s, and that kind of turned it around too, where people found out ways of doing things by their own terms and doing that. And that's something that kind of goes into all types of lifestyle besides just performing. It's the way you eat, the way you look at how you live, the way you consume things. And some people decide they want to make things. Other people decide they want to just buy stuff. They look at stuff as products. Other people look at it as part of they're all elements of their lives. So it's kind of like a defining thing where some people involved with DIY culture, they're all going to do it to varying degrees. Not everybody's going to be living like a hermit and like living in like a Unabomber shack, making everything that they own. But there's other people that are very dedicated to a community-minded thing of supporting local business, local agriculture, and sustainable living. And that ties into performing with music as well. And that's something that I think more people can try to look into. And there's a lot of online resources and stuff, and there are ways of people to interconnect and try to make this community a bigger thing than just small groups of people working in cities and stuff. I guess that's kind of DIY, but I'm sure there's a Wikipedia definition that's a little different than that, but that's my 2 cents.
I mean, I like that,
yeah.
Especially in the Valley, which
yeah.
is so huge on locally grown things
yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, if you look at this art show, like, there's a lot of great artists in this who have never shown work together, and they all came together for this festival that's going to happen next weekend. And it's really exciting seeing things like this where you get a bunch of people with different ideas and ideologies and lifestyles, and they get together and great things come from it. And that's kind of a testimony of what Flywheel tries to aim to do. Do you have any other random questions, you think?
I know it's a collective, so no
yeah.
one really has any official positions. But if you
we actually have. It's interesting. Like, it's just something on the paper, but we have a secretary, we have a treasurer, and we have people who are on paper for the government, president and vice president, because of 501c3 tax purposes, and we have a board of directors which meets once a year and does an annual meeting and votes in the board. But generally, that's something that's on paper. It's something that occasionally we may have to make a last-minute decision, and we have the voting members and the board members try to come to consensus on something. But wait, do you want to continue the question? But yeah, there's ways where there always will be power dynamics and hierarchical things, even within groups that are trying to be non-hierarchical. So it's difficult to eliminate that, since our society is kind of based on certain people taking on active roles and other people taking on roles that are less active. Sometimes people that by default wind up getting a power role, but other times it winds up being somebody just being drawn to something. And sometimes there can be kind of negative consequences where sometimes people get deterred by something due to the fact that somebody's looked as an authoritarian figure, and that may just be that individual's perception, or it might be something that's kind of factual. It's a hard line to really define, because sometimes there's people who, you hear them say one thing and you think, oh man, this person's completely like, they're like way out to space and they're talking like they're Mao or something. But really, that's just one sentence they said that could be misquoted or something. But I guess.
Any more?
I mean, no.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for hanging. I'd still like to email you the answers of the other questions that you had sent me about performance stuff. But yeah, I'm happy that this project's coming together. It'll be exciting to see how it comes together once it's all edited. How long is it gonna be? About like 10 minutes or?
Major for right now.
Yeah.
They're trying really hard to make it a little bit more legit.
Yeah.
But they're running into a lot of problems between.
Is it funding and stuff, or?
Is it what?
Is funding an issue with that?
I mean, no, I don't think it's funding at all.
Yeah.
I think it's
The
mostly the school, the teachers, the administration.
Wow.
Alumni have been fighting it a little bit.
Really? I wonder why. Do they want the school to become more based on just like science stuff and other things that might seem more profitable?
Part of it has been that they're fighting to prove that.
It's pretty cool to see all this come together. Like we had this really great installation up last week too with some artists from Vermont, but this has definitely been one of the best installations we've had in here since we've been doing art since last April.
Because I know the last footage that Josh shot had different stuff up.
Yeah,
this
it was
wasn't
a
what was
cardboard
up.
installation that had a bunch of detail and pieces of cardboard.
And what is Josh doing? Is he learning the soundboard right now?
He might be hanging in there, yeah, learning something about minimal stuff with just like the faders and stuff with the sounds. There was at least like 50, 60 people there. It was packed.
Yeah, but it was like just the right number of
Yeah.
people. Like more and it would have been insane.
Yeah.
Less and it would have been like, oh, the show was like kind of canceled yesterday, but it was like perfect.
There was another time when John Drew played on a bridge in between taverns.
Jake's birthday.
That was really intense too. Yeah. And there's also a space in Amherst that they show in the living room at Railroad Street. That's the one that I was pretty interested in. Some other stuff.
Yeah, on the bridge was Jay's birthday party.
Was that working?
Birthday play.
Yeah.
Cover Straight Revenge.
Yeah. That's the only time you guys covered it, right?
It was a surprise.
Yeah, it took the 2 outs and the zone.
Yeah, for the shutdowns.
Yeah.
So the board, when it goes against the PA, it's all over there.
Yeah, the racks. Did you hear that band? Oh, that's pretty decent.
I didn't like the first album, but they're still in the new record right now. It's pretty good.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit more of Hot Snakes.
Yeah. The first one just was kind of boring.
Yeah.
But the new one definitely, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Before hearing that, I was like, whatever. But after
The thing that would have made me really like excited would have been if Mario Ruben was drumming. But that's the one thing that like if that guy's playing with Mario, I would have been sold. I'd been like, all right, I'm there like the whole night.
I've never seen
I got to listen to the Earthless. I was the first people on one, but I didn't get to go. But he's one of the best drummers in the city.
I never got into it.
They were better than Richard Hudson because Richard just put up parallels, so they kind of slumped down.
It's just got like that one good song.
They have the tunes, yeah. And they're all pentagram knockoffs.
I really like that.
Stuff like this, just good. This is like the brightest I've ever seen this space.
Yeah, I'm back in slacker mode.
Huh?
I've ridden the anxiety wave and I'm off it.
Don't,
now.
no, not till Sunday. You're on it till Sunday.
The high five was like the end of it.
That was it? I'm never high-fiving you again.
Kinda though, yeah.
Well, you have a high-fiving problem. Also, Chris mentioned the roofs, so we should...
The what?
The roof. The ceiling, I suppose. It was like...
Special lighting there?
CVS until 7:30. And then I picked up Mark, and then we walked.
Are you serious?
It's happened twice so far, and it's been the cutest thing ever.
So cute.
And I was like, Mark, you're getting out in a few minutes, right?
Yeah, that was a good impression.
You know, yeah, and then it's like been a lot of fun. Yes, I heard the second 7-inch, huh?